Occasionally, prospective adoptive parents come to adoption with the hope of healing their own hurt. And this expectation that I can do for this child what was not done for me, or I will not do to this child what was done to me, has to do with the family's own history of neglect and trauma. And they feel by adopting a child with a history of trauma that they can heal their own. One interesting story I think really brings this topic to an understanding, at least it did for me. Again, most of the people in my world are adoptive families, so I learn a lot about adoption from them. And a friend of mine was the birth child born into an adoptive home. Her mother could not have children, they thought, and so they had two adopted children. These children were 8 to 10 years older than my friend Susan. And when Susan was born, her mother was 44 years old. And Susan grew up with the thinking and feeling that she was always in her mother's way. The other children were older, the mother had an established career, and she was always being shoved aside. And so she said, I basically grew up emotionally abandoned. I made a vow with myself that my child would never feel that way. When she got married, when Susan and her husband got married, they also could not have children. And so they adopted their daughter. And it was very interesting when this little girl came into their home. Stop there. I think you can backtrack to the story.
Yes.
I forget where I left off.
She got married and they adopted.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. I can. When Susan got married, they ended up adopting as well. And what was really interesting, when Kathy came into their home, Susan had made this vow that her child, again, would never feel as she did, emotionally abandoned. So for years, every night, she would put her little daughter to bed and sit outside the bedroom in a rocking chair and read till she was assured that this little girl was asleep. Well, this went on literally for years. And one evening, she put her daughter to bed and did the same routine. The little daughter was in 5th grade, I believe. And that evening, everything was quiet, and she was reading. And all of a sudden, the light went on in the child's bedroom. And her daughter came stomping out of the room and looked at her mother and said, "You can stop doing all of this. I will be fine." And she realized that she was just smothering her daughter in an attempt to deal with her own pain of emotional abandonment. So I think it's important as adoptive parents move into this adoption process, if there's a history of trauma, a history of neglect, that they work with a therapist to resolve some of this in their own life. Otherwise, it will be like a train wreck waiting to happen.